Well, one of the participants in that program, in fact, I think the lone voice of reason in that Marae program, was Suzanne Levy from Speak Up for Women, who often appears on the platform, and she's doing so again right now. Suzanne, how are you? Is this victory? This victory for you?
Oh, look, there's nothing victorious about that whole show, really, and it's quite scary being described as the voice of reason, I have to say. But thanks for having me back.
But this complaint, right? Do you know who made this complaint?
Yes, I do, yes.
Okay, is that a friend of yours or a friend of Speak Up for
Yeah, definitely a friend of Speak Up for Women,
Cool.
and somebody who's following this whole, absolutely.
Well, I found the decision not remarkable in that it pinged Shaneel for something. The lengths it went not to criticise the program overall in any other aspect.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've read through the decision, and it's picked up the tiny bits of balance that there were, because there were some. I mean, I was able to speak, but it was pretty hostile, and there was plenty said. I think what the complaint doesn't really address is the kind of overall feeling that it was Scotty Morrison who was the presenter.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah. Scotty Morrison, that's right.
And
who's a wokester from way back.
Oh, and he just presented, Shaneel Lal with his Young New Zealander of the Year award, and he was all over him, and it was just there was no balance in the whole. And
you weren't flowing up to take part in studio. You were at the disadvantage of being by phone or by video link, right?
Yeah, I was via Zoom.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, is probably better than being in the same room as Lal. But
okay, so we had Scotty Morrison, who was the moderator for the Marae program, which, by the way, is a government-funded branch of Television New Zealand, of wokeism from television. So Scotty Morrison, Shaneel Lal, Young New Zealander of the Year, Herald columnist, and who else?
Kylie Quince, who's an AUT
But she's some mad activist woke academic, isn't she? And she's mates with all the people at the Disinformation Project. She
is, and she's clearly firmly on the same side as Shaneel Lal. I think she was at the protests in Albert Park.
God, and they still let her take part, and so.
I think that's true. I wouldn't like to, be the subject of a
looks
media
like the sort of person who would be.
I think she did say she was. So it was pretty. I felt very much on the back foot, and I did manage to get some stuff out about free speech, which was good. But it was kind of there was this constant flow from Shaneel Lal, little things about turfs and this kind of the histrionics that you sort of expect from him, and he's got no knowledge about free speech. He's just we know what he's like. So it was
he
pretty
brings
impossible.
Both genders into disrepute, I think. Now,
well, no, he doesn't, because he's only one. He you can have him, Sean.
Good. I thought that was a good line of mine, but that's a great comeback.
It's a great line, but you need to think it through. Yeah.
Now, look, the other thing was they said this was about free speech, and I looked at that piece of television. That was just a setup. That was just to promulgate the view that Posey Parker was a Nazi, and anyone who said so was just wrong. It was terribly biased in its very formulation. And you were the lone voice. They didn't get Jonathan Ayling from the Free Speech Union, who are the experts on this. Didn't. And they got Kylie Quince, a person who was completely woke and completely politicised. And then they have Shaneel.
They should have had someone from the Free Speech Union. I mean, I did ask them if they would have somebody. I thought because initially when the show was proposed, Marama Davidson was also going to be there, so that was their original lineup, was the three of them and me. And obviously having Jonathan there would have been kind of sensible as well in order to provide some balance. But they sort of glossed over the fact that it had been decided that she could come into the country, that there'd been a court hearing, and she was allowed into the country. So in terms of whether her speech was unlawful, it had already really been established that it wasn't. So it should have come down to the freedom of speech laws in the Bill of Rights, and it came down to mob rule.
Okay, so they ping Shaneel on one thing, and then they say, surprisingly, and we're not going to bother doing anything about that. We're not going to fine the broadcaster. We're not going to ask anyone to apologise. And in some ways, you were the person at the front line of that, of having to sit there while he lied about Posey Parker, but he's not going to issue an apology. Television New Zealand isn't going to have to issue an apology for its appalling journalism and lack of ethics and standards. It is just ignored.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worse than a wet bus ticket.
I would like I think an apology from the Marae program or TVNZ would be appropriate. I don't think, I guess in some ways they're responsible for what Shaneel Lal says on the program. If they're going to invite him on the program, they need to sort of be responsible for managing that situation. Yeah. And so I wouldn't expect the apology. I wouldn't expect an apology to come from him, anyway. I would... Yeah, I think TVNZ or Marae, whoever, kind of wherever the buck stops, which is wherever it's appropriate, they should be issuing some sort of apology, at least saying, about the decision and the fact that this is what was said and this is wrong.
Yeah.
So
Suzanne, do you think? And here's a serious question for you: do you think a change of government will change any of this?
I think it could. I think it could change things. If you think about the fact that there was that poll, the Talbot Mills poll that was released, and it showed pretty much where the public sits on this stuff, which we already knew because we've already polled on it. So, but the last 5 years we've been told that no one else thinks like that. That we're outliers for believing such nonsense like that. Men can't be lesbians and all that kind of nonsense. And so it's clear that people actually do, most reasonable people don't think that men should be in women's spaces, or there should be spaces that women can have that are free from men. And the thing is, once people start talking about it, once people realise that their neighbour actually feels the same way that they do, and that they're not this kind of lone person thinking these thoughts that are completely unacceptable, I think that all sort of builds on itself. So even the releasing of that poll I found quite extraordinary. It had, I think in the top 5 things on the list, 3 of them were related to gender identity.